Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a time when winter wasn't just an inconvenience. It was a gauntlet of survival. You're not bundled in a parka with central heating waiting back home. Nope. You're a medieval peasant in the dead of winter, and your toes are already numb just from waking up. The fire went out hours ago. Your breath puffs in little white clouds above your head, and you can practically snap the air like a twig. Your thatch roof cottage. It's doing its best, which isn't saying much. There's frost crawling up the inside of the walls, and something just scurried under the straw-stuffed mattress. That's not a good sign. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you all are listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up wrapped in a coarse wool blanket that smells like damp sheep. That's actually the least of your problems. The hearth fire is cold, reduced to a pile of pale ash, and the morning frost has crept across the dirt floor. You don't own shoes so much as leather scraps loosely tied to your feet, and when they touch the icy ground, you let out an involuntary hiss. There's no snooze button here, just the realization that if you don't get moving, you might actually freeze where you lie. Outside, the wind howls like a lonely wolf. The trees stand naked, crusted in frost. Your breath fogs the air as you tug on your stiffest pair of hose stiff, because they're still a bit wet from yesterday and frozen into a sort of crunchy shape. Welcome to winter. The first rule is simple. If you stop moving, you stop living. Your family, maybe 7 of you, including 2 distant cousins and a nameless baby who always seems to be teething stirs in the gloom. Your father groans as he rises, bones creaking like old wood, and your mother is already feeding dry twigs into the hearth. Fire means life. But kindling is in short supply. You burned most of the wooden furniture last week, and now you're eyeing the barn door like it's firewood in waiting. Your entire home is maybe 2 rooms if you're lucky. One for sleeping and living, the other for storing what little you have left to eat. The wind whistles through the gaps in the walls, and the ceiling drips melted frost down your back whenever a crow dares land on the roof. The real struggle starts before dawn. You need to get the fire going again, and with no matches or lighters, that means flint steel and sheer stubbornness. It can take 10 minutes or an hour, depending on the humidity, your skill, and your luck, all while your fingers grow numb. Historians still argue whether most medieval homes had chimneys or just smoke holes in the roof, but either way, the air inside quickly fills with smoke. Your eyes sting. You cough, but you huddle close because warmth is everything. Once the flames catch, the smell of burning straw fills the room. It's oddly comforting proof you're still alive and your nose hasn't frozen off yet. Your younger brother throws on last summer's tunic, now worn down to threads, and hops from foot to foot, trying to shake off the chill. You can see his ribs. One fun fact you might not expect: peasants sometimes slept with their animals for warmth. Chickens roosting on rafters, pigs snuffling in the corners. If you're really lucky, maybe a goat curls up by your side. Not exactly cozy, but warm. And warm is a gift. You sip a mouthful of yesterday's gruel oats if you're lucky. Just hot water with weeds if you're not. No sugar. No salt. Just enough to put something in your belly before venturing out into the bitter morning. The local priest once said, "Hunger sharpens the soul." You suspect it also sharpens your hallucinations. And yet, life goes on. You trudge outside in the thin pre-dawn light, your breath fogging up like a tiny chimney. The fields are hard with frost, the tools frozen solid. Even the outhouse door is iced shut. You mutter a quiet prayer that today the pigs are still breathing, because you're not sure what you'll do if they're not. You throw on every layer you own, 2 woolen tunics, a stiff cloak that smells like old onions, and some leg wraps that might have once been socks but are now more whole than fabric. Medieval fashion isn't about looking good. It's about not dying. You might even add a fur collar if someone in your village had a fox unlucky enough to get caught last season. Doesn't matter if it's crawling with lice. Warm is warm. The truth is, medieval winter clothing is more patchwork survival than outfit of the day. Your boots, if you have any, are leather soaked from yesterday's sleet and cracking from the cold. No waterproofing, no insulation, just pure medieval optimism. You wrap a strip of linen around your face, leaving a gap for your eyes, and step outside. The wind punches you like a tax collector with something to prove. Your neighbor emerges from his hovel looking like a walking scarecrow. You nod, he grunts. Conversation is unnecessary when the frost is threatening to chew off your ears. Everyone's too cold to be chatty. Besides, it's not like anyone smells fresh. You haven't bathed in weeks, and neither has he. That's winter. Now remember those itchy wool layers. They're not just itchy, they're also infested. Lice are your constant companions. They live in your seams, party in your armpits, and nibble away while you sleep. You can pick them off one by one, but tomorrow they'll be back. Some peasants actually sewed little pouches of dried herbs, lavender, thyme, or wormwood into their tunics to mask the smell and maybe chase off a few bugs. Did it work? Historians still argue whether it was folk wisdom or wishful thinking. One quirky tidbit: some folks believed that if you never removed your clothes during winter, the lice would get bored and leave. Spoiler, they did not. You spend half your waking hours scratching. Your scalp, your chest, behind your knees. And don't even get started on the flea bites. They love the warm folds where your body meets your too many layers. It's like a medieval spa day for them. Yet somehow all this layering sort of works. At least enough to avoid frostbite most days. You and your family huddle together inside body heat, pooled under the same moth-bitten blankets. Every hour someone adds a handful of twigs to the hearth. Fire never sleeps. There's an art to staying warm without catching fire. Long tunics can brush too close to the flames. Your sister learned that the hard way last year. She's fine now, just a new bald spot, and a story everyone keeps retelling with exaggerated screams. Wool is king in the medieval wardrobe, not because it's glamorous, but because it repels moisture better than linen. And when it freezes, it sort of hardens into armor against the cold. Stylish, no. Effective, you'll take it. You pull your cloak tighter and slip your hands under your arms. Gloves are a luxury. Mittens even more so. You make do with wrapping your hands in scraps or tucking them into your tunic when they go numb. One of the village elders claims he once wrapped his hands in cabbage leaves under his sleeves. Keeps the fingers warm and the wolves away, he says. You're not convinced. And speaking of wolves, yes, they're real. Winter is lean for them too. You might hear their howls at night, distant and long, or find paw prints circling the edges of the village come morning. The sheep are locked in the byre, but that doesn't always stop a desperate pack. Inside, someone's socks are steaming near the fire, giving off an aroma of wet wool and foot. Your little brother's trying to dry his mittens by resting them directly on the coals. You yank them off just before they smolder. Cold doesn't just creep in from the outside. It nestles in your bones, settles behind your knees, takes up residence in your lower back. There's no such thing as feeling warm, only degrees of less frozen. Still, you find ways to stay sane. You learn the best positions to sleep in for warmth. The perfect spot on the bench that gets the most heat from the fire, and how to balance your boots on the hearthstones without them catching fire. Mostly. Some evenings after chores are done and night falls early, you and your siblings sit close together and trade stories. Your uncle tells one about a man who wore 6 tunics and was mistaken for a bear. You laugh, sort of. You're not sure it wasn't true. Winter clothing isn't comfortable, it isn't clean, and it definitely isn't cute. But every louse-bitten layer, every flea-infested seam is a line of defense against the chill that waits patiently outside your door. The hearth is the center of your universe. It's not just where you cook or keep warm, it's where you live. Without it, you're just a bundle of cloth shivering in a wooden box. The moment the morning flint spark catches, and that tiny flame licks the twigs, life begins again. It's mesmerizing in a smoky, ash-in-your-eyes sort of way. You squat low to tend it, blinking through the acrid haze. There's no chimney, just a smoke hole in the thatch. And most of the time, the smoke decides it would rather hang around and get to know your lungs. Your eyes water constantly. Your throat burns. But you lean in closer anyway, because warm face equals good. Cold face equals frostbite. Some wealthier homes had a proper stone hearth with a hooded chimney to draw smoke out. You unfortunately are not wealthy. Historians still argue whether chimney use was widespread among peasants by the 14th century, or if it remained a luxury for manor lords and overly pampered monks. For your part, the idea of smoke going out of the house instead of into your eyes feels like heresy. Breakfast, if you can call it that, starts here. You hang a blackened iron pot over the fire using a crooked metal hook, and into it goes whatever you have, which might be a handful of oats, some split peas, and a suspicious root you found half frozen in the shed. Add water, lots of it, and stir with a stick. That's your porridge. Lumpy, lukewarm, possibly alive. Still, it warms your belly even if it tastes like bark and regret. Everyone in the house crowds the hearth. It's the only warm spot, so elbows are out. Tempers are short, and someone's always inching in just a little too close. The baby's wrapped in swaddling and placed in a basket nearby, absorbing secondhand heat like a little medieval solar panel. The dog curls under the bench, occasionally lifting its head to cough, sneeze, or fart, sometimes in triumphant combination. The walls of the house are wattle and daub, thin wooden strips, crisscrossed and slathered with a paste of mud hay, and yes, sometimes dung. It holds together. Barely. But the warmth of the hearth doesn't get far. Just a few feet from the fire, the cold creeps back in, and the frost snakes down from the rafters, like it's licking its lips. Still, the hearth does more than warm. It's where you cook dry clothes, heat water for washing if you're lucky, and occasionally light splinters of wood for carrying a flame to the animal stalls. It's the heart of the household, equal parts kitchen stove heater and therapist. You stare into the flames more than you'd like to admit. They almost feel alive. There's a strange comfort in watching the slow dance of embers, the hiss of sap, the crackle of dry twigs giving way. It keeps your mind from wandering too far to the fields, to the debts owed to the distant thought that spring might not come this year. One quirky detail, some villagers believed the fire had a spirit. You had to treat it with respect, no spitting into it, no letting it die out without an apology. Letting the hearth go cold was more than just inconvenient. It was almost sacrilegious. On particularly cold nights, you heat stones in the fire, wrap them in cloth, and stuff them in the bedding. It's a temporary fix, and the stones eventually cool, but for a while your feet don't feel like solid blocks of misery. You even use the hearth to make basic light. Tallow candles are expensive, so if you're lucky, you might have a bowl with animal fat and a wick to burn. Otherwise, you rely on the firelight alone. It flickers across the walls, throwing warped shadows and turning everyone's face into a grim medieval painting. Even your conversations circle around the hearth. By night, someone might tell a ghost story or hum a hymn. Maybe your uncle describes the time he saw a comet blaze across the sky, an omen, he insists. The hearth is your gathering place, your comfort zone, your survival strategy. And when the fire starts to die, there's a quiet panic. Who'll go out for more wood? Are there even any sticks left? Will someone have to burn the spare stool again? Once your neighbor burned a family heirloom chair, 15th century, carved by a great-grandfather no one liked. The heat lasted maybe 2 hours. Worth it, he said. No regrets. As you poke the coals and stir the pot again, you feel that low, ever-present fear. What happens if you run out of fuel? The woods are bare. Gathering means exposure. And if snow falls heavy again, the fire could be your last line of defense. You stare into the flames as they flicker and spit. The heat makes your cheeks burn, but you don't move back. Not even an inch. Because here the hearth is life, and you plan on staying alive. You step outside into a world that feels like it's been dipped in ice. The sky is a pale, sour gray, and the ground crunches underfoot. Your breath curls into the cold air and drifts away like a spirit. The fields stretch ahead of you, white, frozen, and utterly unwilling to cooperate. The animals need you. That much doesn't change even when your fingers go stiff and your nose starts to drip. You trudge toward the byre, your patched boots slipping a little on the frozen muck. The smell hits first damp straw manure and something earthy that might be mold. Lovely. Still, it's warmer in here than outside thanks to the body heat of a few miserable cows and one belligerent pig. The animal's water trough has frozen solid overnight. Again, you grab a dull iron axe and start chopping through the ice. Every strike sends vibrations up your arms and into your back. You're not even sure your eyebrows can feel anything anymore. Eventually, the ice gives and you scoop out chunks with a wooden bucket. The animals grunt their appreciation, or maybe they're just complaining same as you. It's not glamorous, but you're lucky to have livestock at all. Some families share animals between 3 or 4 homes, taking turns feeding and mucking. And no matter how brutal the cold gets, someone has to make sure the beasts don't freeze to death. They're not just animals. They're food labor status, even warmth. One cow can mean the difference between a brutal winter and an unlivable one. That pig over there, she might seem grumpy, but she's practically a roommate. She's even got a name. Not that anyone will say it aloud. Naming animals is frowned upon when their fate is sealed come spring. You haul a bundle of musty hay into the stall. The cows munch lazily, frost crusting the tips of their whiskers. Their breath steams in the air, and for a moment the world is almost quiet, just chewing, snorting, and the soft sound of hay being pulled apart. But outside the barn, the real work waits. Frozen fields don't care that it's winter. You still have to check fences, clear snow, break up frozen feed, and haul wood from whatever pitiful pile remains. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll find turnips hidden under straw. They'll be half rotten, but hey, fiber is fiber. And yes, your tools are cold too. The wooden handles are slick with frost, and the metal is so frigid, it stings your fingers through your linen wraps. You do the work anyway, teeth chattering in time with the rhythm of your hoe. Even with nothing growing, the land demands your attention. You must prepare for spring mend, what's broken dig trenches so meltwater won't flood your garden later. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly rested in winter. Some sources suggest the cold season was less labor-intensive. Others argue that the struggle to maintain food warmth and life made it just as hard, if not harder. It doesn't help that days are short. You barely get 8 hours of murky daylight. Blink, and the sun's gone again, leaving you to stumble through chores by torchlight or moon glow. By mid-morning, your cheeks are stinging, not from heat, but from windburn. Your lips have cracked. Your knuckles are bleeding in little splits, no matter how many times you lick them or rub them with pig fat. There's no balm, no chapstick, just grit and hope. You pause to check the chicken coop. It's more of a wooden crate on stilts, stuffed with straw and the occasional egg. You fish your hand inside and feel, yes, still warm. A single miraculous egg. Breakfast tomorrow might not taste like wet moss after all. One fun fact, some peasants tried insulating animal sheds with their own clothes. Not as in old rags, we're talking about actively taking off a tunic and stuffing it into a drafty corner. Priorities. Heat now, modesty later. You return to the house dragging a bundle of kindling tied with a frozen length of twine. Your arms ache. Your nose is running. You can't remember the last time your toes didn't feel like little wooden stumps. Inside, everyone looks at you like you've returned from war. You dump the wood beside the hearth strip off your outer cloak, now more ice than fabric, and hold your hands to the flames. The fire hisses at the sudden wetness, steam curling up like a welcome home banner. You don't speak. You just breathe. The world outside is still there, bleak, frozen, and unwilling. But inside the hearth crackles. There's hay on your cloak mud on your knees, and maybe, just maybe, a warm egg in your pocket. The coughs begin as soon as the temperature drops. At first, it's just a dry tickle at the back of your throat. You ignore it. Everyone coughs. But by midwinter, the sound is everywhere, rasping from under blankets, echoing off the daub walls, bouncing between bedrolls like a cursed lullaby. You're not sick, you tell yourself. Not really. Just cold. Just tired. Just wheezing a little. There are no doctors in your village. Not unless you count the shepherd who once splinted his own leg with a fence post and now claims to be an expert. Instead, when illness spreads, and it always does, you turn to what your ancestors did, layers of wool cups of boiling nettle tea, and a litany of odd folk remedies that range from questionable to flat-out bizarre for your sore throat. You try gargling warm ale mixed with crushed onions. For a fever, your mother swears by wrapping you in wet linens and placing you beside the fire until you steam out the evil. And if the cough sticks around longer than a week, you're instructed to sleep with a sliced red onion under your pillow. Not for the smell, though, that's certainly effective, but because onions are thought to pull sickness from the blood. Historians still argue whether these methods had any genuine effect, or were simply the medieval version of placebo comfort. One truly odd cure, a paste of moldy bread mashed with warm milk slathered on the chest and wrapped in linen. You might think it sounds disgusting, and you'd be right. But centuries later, scientists would discover that mold, particularly the penicillium kind, actually does have antibacterial properties. So yes, you're basically inventing antibiotics with your breakfast. Congratulations. Unfortunately, illness during winter is often more than just uncomfortable. It's dangerous. You're already weak from poor nutrition. The house is full of smoke and nobody's immune system is doing its job. If one person gets sick, the rest of the household usually follows within days. The straw bedding becomes a nest of sneezes. The fire can't warm everyone at once. You sleep close, coughing into each other's hair, and just hope no one starts burning up with fever. You might try heating a compress, a folded rag dipped in elderflower tea or vinegar, and placing it over the forehead. Maybe you smear goose fat on your chest and cover it with flannel. Maybe you whisper a charm while you do it. No one's judging. In winter, superstition and survival are roommates. The local priest might be called in not to heal, but to pray. He holds your hand, murmurs Latin, and reminds you that suffering is a pathway to heaven. Helpful. Some families light a special candle and keep it burning all night in hopes of warding off death. Others hang dried herbs over the doorway, sage for strength, rosemary for memory, garlic for everything else. You know someone who swears by keeping a spoon of honey under the tongue while sleeping. You tried it once, woke up stuck to your blanket, and regretting all your life choices. Children are hit hardest. Your little sister has been sniffling for a week now. Her cheeks are flushed, her eyes glassy. Your mother makes her a hot drink of boiled mint and scraped birch bark. She sips it, grimaces, and curls up closer to the fire. There's no escape from the damp. Every cloth feels slightly wet. Your boots never fully dry. Even the walls sweat on warmer days, dripping onto your already clammy bedding. And dampness is sickness's best friend. You've heard rumors from other villages. Tales of strange winter fevers that sweep through hamlets, leaving half the people pale and quiet and never waking up. Some blame it on evil spirits trapped in the cold air. Others on bad humors building up in the belly. No one really knows. One fringe belief you've heard: if someone with a strong enough will breathes into a cloth and ties it around the sick person's wrist, their warmth will pull out the fever. Sounds poetic. You tried it once on your cousin. He got better, but you're still not sure if it was you, the cloth, or just plain time. And still you go on. You cough, you sniffle, you lie under 3 layers of itchy blankets, your nose pressed against your knee for warmth. And when the fire burns low, you drag yourself up, shivering, to feed it more twigs. No one else will. They're all too tired, too sick, or already asleep, deep and dreamless in the grip of cold. Still, there's a strange kind of resilience to it. You learn to function at 40% strength. You learn to walk while coughing, to milk a goat, while your head spins, to smile at your siblings, while quietly wondering if your lungs are about to collapse. The winter doesn't care if you're sick, so neither can you not for long. Sleep is supposed to be the time your body repairs itself, when you curl up, shut out the world, and recharge. Not here. Not now. In a medieval, winter sleep is a tactical maneuver less about comfort, more about survival. You don't just go to bed, you brace yourself for it. Night begins early. The sun barely makes it past mid-afternoon before slinking away behind the trees. Inside the hearth dims and shadows lengthen like spilled ink across the walls. You and your family prepare for another night packed like spoons into a shared bed, or what passes for one a pile of straw layered with old sacks, flattened cloaks, and a few lice-infested sheepskins. Luxury, really. Luxury. You don't sleep alone. That's how people die. You sleep close, so close that elbows jab ribs, knees press spines, and someone's cold feet inevitably end up wedged between your thighs. It's miserable. It's warm. And it's the only option. There's no such thing as pajamas. You sleep in your clothes sometimes with your outer cloak still on your shoes, placed right under your head for safekeeping, and maybe as a semi-firm pillow. If you're lucky, there's a goat nearby curled into your back. It smells like wet hay and stale milk, but it's alive and radiates heat, so you cuddle it like a slightly judgmental hot water bottle. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants followed a first sleep, second sleep pattern in winter, waking up around midnight for an hour or two to stoke the fire, pray, snack. Or according to some texts, even sneak outside for a smoke. Yes, really. You're not exactly sure what's historical and what's exhaustion-fueled legend, but you do know that you often wake in the dark for no reason at all. The fire's low. Someone's snoring. The wind outside makes the shutters rattle. You lie still, afraid to shift, lest you lose the tiny pocket of heat you've managed to build around yourself. The fire must be tended, always. So someone draws the short straw and stumbles up to throw more wood or whatever passes for fuel onto the coals. Sometimes it's dried moss, sometimes it's dung. Once in a moment of desperation, it was your little brother's only toy cart. He cried for 3 nights, then forgot it ever existed. Sleep is rarely uninterrupted. There's the cold for one. Your toes go numb first, then your fingers. You sleep curled tight, your chin tucked to your chest, arms folded under your armpits. And there's the noise, your cousin grinding his teeth, the pig shifting on its haunches, someone muttering half a prayer in their sleep. You learn to sleep through it all. Mostly. And then there are the dreams, vivid, feverish, strange. You dream of warm bread, of a full bath, of lying in a sunlit field with the grass tickling your skin. Then you wake drooling slightly onto straw and remember where you are. One fringe belief says that dreams are stronger in the cold. That the winter gods send messages when your breath hangs in the dark and your heart beats slow with chill. Maybe that's why you always dream in color when it's below freezing. Sometimes, to warm yourself, you press a hot stone heated from the hearth against your belly under your tunic. It burns at first, then fades, the warmth sinking into your bones. It cools quickly, but for those precious minutes, you remember what it means to feel alive. Everyone in the house follows the same grim routine. The old folks sleep in the center, closer to the fire. Children line the outer edges like sacrificial blankets. You're somewhere in the middle half, curled around the family cat, who has somehow claimed the warmest spot without negotiation. No one sleeps deeply. You're always half aware of your body, the cold, the damp, and the straw beneath you. You rotate positions every few hours, like geese migrating in place. Whoever's warmest takes the edge, whoever's frozen takes their turn in the middle. And in those moments between sleep and waking, when the fire crackles softly and the frost crusts the inside of the shutter, that you feel it, the fragility of life. How easily it slips away if you stop fighting for it, if you stop feeding the flame. One morning, your sister wakes with frost in her eyebrows. Another, the baby sleeps so still your mother checks his breath 3 times. But every night you survive is a victory. Every sunrise a quiet celebration. You learn to live in sleep's shadow, never fully surrendered, always half-braced, curled like a comma around the body next to you. Your stomach has been growling for so long it's practically developed its own language. The winter hunger isn't like ordinary hunger. It's not just an empty belly. It's a hollow ache that settles deep in your bones, a gnawing quiet that becomes part of your routine. You think slower, move slower, even feel colder, because there just isn't enough fuel in your body to do anything more. By now, the autumn stores are nearly gone. The smoked pork was eaten weeks ago. The apples turned soft, then sour, then brown. The cabbages shriveled and rotted one by one. What's left are the desperation foods: cracked barley, old peas, shriveled onions, and a few wizened carrots that look more like angry roots than vegetables. You stretch each meal like it's an art form, making watery stews that taste faintly of salt and mostly of nothing. Today's meal: a soup of boiled kale stems, a pebble-sized hunk of dried bacon rind, and 2 peas carefully rationed. You joke about it being a feast, because if you don't laugh, you'll cry, and you can't spare the water for tears. You chew slowly, not because it's satisfying, but because you need the illusion that the bowl is deeper than it looks. During a bad winter, food shortages can become dire. Some families quietly trade possessions for extra sacks of grain. Anything from wool cloaks to carved spoons to your only good pair of boots. And yes, it's true, in the worst winters, people have eaten boiled leather. Shoelaces, belts, parchment pages. One tale in your village tells of a man who boiled his old glove and tried to flavor it with garlic. Tasted like defeat, he said. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants faced regular starvation or if famine was more cyclical, hitting only in particularly bad years. But right now, with your stomach rumbling and your hands shaking, as you peel the last dried parsnip, it feels pretty regular. You dream of bread. Real bread. Thick, dark loaves with chewy crusts and crumbs that don't crumble into dust. But that dream feels as far away as spring. There's flour left barely, but not enough to bake. So instead, your mother stirs it into hot water and makes a paste she calls gray pudding. No one knows what's in it, and frankly, no one asks. There are no snacks, no sugar, no guilty little indulgences. The closest thing to dessert is chewing on a stale apple core from 3 days ago and pretending it's sweet. And no, you don't get seconds. There are no seconds. One quirky tidbit: you didn't expect rats. Winter should have driven them away, but they seem to thrive. They nibble at your stored barley nest in your kindling pile, and sometimes nibble at your bread while you sleep. You once woke up to find one sitting on the hearthstone, staring at you like it was judging your life choices. You set traps, wooden boxes with baited twine, but they're smart. Too smart. So instead, you hide what little food you have in hanging sacks suspended from rafters and sealed with waxed cloth. It helps, a little. Even your dreams smell like food. Roasted meats, honeyed figs, gravy. You wake with your mouth watering and your pillow damp with drool. Then the cold sets in and reality returns. Still, you make do. You ration carefully. You take smaller bites. You share what you have because in winter, selfishness can unravel a household faster than frost. Even the smallest kindness, like saving someone the last crust of bread, becomes monumental. At the communal bread oven, when it still runs, you see what the other families are surviving on. Flat, blackened discs of rye flour and ground acorns. One woman mixes in tree bark, Another adds boiled nettles. Everyone's just trying to stretch what little they have. And then there are feast days, saints' days, holy days, market festivals, when against all odds, someone roasts a goose or brings out a hidden wedge of cheese. It feels like magic. You get a single bite. You savor it for hours. You remember it for weeks. But mostly you endure. You sip weak broth. You chew dried roots. You pretend the blandness is earthy. You joke about seasoning with hope and dirt. It's not funny, but it passes the time. And when things get really bad, when your lips are pale and your hands tremble, even near the fire you get quiet. You listen to your body go still, as if conserving energy like a hibernating bear. But you survive, somehow, one bite at a time. There's a certain cold that creeps into your chest. Not the kind you feel from the outside, but the kind that rises up from within, starting in your lungs and blooming outward like a slow frost. It's the kind of chill that comes after weeks of poor food, damp clothes, and nights spent breathing in air that stings. You've started coughing. So has your little sister. And the old man next door hasn't been seen in 2 days. Illness in winter is almost expected. Everyone's immune system is running on empty. If hunger doesn't get you a bad cough, just might. You try to stay warm and dry, but it's nearly impossible. Your only shirt is never fully dry anymore, and your boots, well, calling them boots might be generous. They're leather sacks with holes. If you had woolen stockings, once you don't anymore. When someone does fall ill, remedies are creative. Your mother smears goose fat on your chest and wraps you in linen soaked in garlic water. It smells like soup and feels like defeat, but you don't argue. She also stuffs dried herbs, fennel, wormwood, maybe some thyme into little cloth bundles and heats them over the fire. You breathe in the smoke like it's medicine, even though it mostly smells like burnt weeds. Sometimes a traveling cunning woman stops by the village carrying potions in little leather pouches and claiming to heal anything from fevers to heartbreak. She waves a carved stick over your head and mutters something in half Latin. Is it real? Who knows? But it's a distraction, and that counts for something. The official doctor, if you even have one nearby, is useless to peasants. His cures involve coin leeches or mercury, and you don't have any of the three. You stick with what's free garlic elderflower tea and hot rocks wrapped in cloth to hold against your chest. Historians still argue whether medieval folk medicine was genuinely effective or mostly placebo. But the truth is, when you're sick and desperate, a hot compress and a whispered prayer feel like the same thing. Of course, you've seen worse. Last winter, someone in the next village caught lung fever and was dead within a week. No one dared enter their house after that, not because of the sickness, but because death felt contagious. You don't talk much about death, but it's always nearby in winter. The church bell rings quieter these days, less celebratory, more resigned. And if a burial is needed, the ground is often too frozen to dig, so bodies are wrapped and stored in a cold corner of the chapel, waiting for a thaw. Morbid, sure. But when you grow up with that reality, it becomes just another part of the season. Like firewood or snow, or soup made from questionable things. The weirdest remedy you've heard. One neighbor swears that hanging a dead mole over your doorway keeps fever away. Another ties a toad's foot around their ankle during cold season. Yet another claims eating burnt onion skins prevents sore throats. These are not things you read in medical textbooks. These are what you do when you're terrified, cold, and running out of options. Your grandmother talks about a time when an entire winter passed without illness in the family. She credits it to Saint Apollonia, and a dried sprig of holly hung above the hearth. You nod and smile because in winter belief is its own medicine. When a cough turns wet and deep, you sleep sitting up. Lying down makes your lungs feel like they're filling with stones. Your breath wheezes out like a broken bellows, and sleep becomes shallow and strange. Still you work. Because no one gets to stop working just because they're sick. You haul wood, you stir the stew, you help clean the latrine trench behind the house, trying not to gag, trying not to wheeze. No one wants to do it, but it has to be done or the sickness will spread. One odd bright spot, snow. It covers everything like a clean sheet, muting the mess of mud and waste that normally slicks the streets. It feels fresh even if you know it's a lie. You gather snow to melt for water safer than the old well, which sometimes tastes odd. Some days you imagine summer. Not just the warmth, but the green, the fullness of it, the smell of hay and bees. It feels so far away it might as well be a dream. But you cling to that thought when your lungs hurt and your breath is short. You imagine lying in the grass, barefoot, eating fresh bread with cheese, and not coughing once. You sip another mug of hot water steeped with whatever dried leaves your mother found in the loft. You tuck your blanket tighter around your shoulders. You close your eyes and try to remember what sunlight feels like on bare skin. You cough again, but you're still here. There's a moment just before dawn, when the cold is at its worst, when even the embers in the hearth have surrendered, and you wake up with frost on your blanket. That's when you realize how much of winter survival is simply waiting for light. But the real trick keeping the hearth fire alive through the night. You're responsible for that tonight. You kneel on the hard-packed dirt floor, poking the embers with an iron rod that's warped from years of use. The goal is to bank the fire pile ash over it, keep just enough oxygen flowing so it doesn't die, but not enough to make it blaze and waste precious fuel. It's a delicate dance, and if you mess it up, everyone wakes to a stone-cold hearth. No pressure. Without fire, your home becomes a box of misery. No warmth, no hot food, no light to dress wounds or scare off the dark. So you crouch by the fireplace and coax the coals like a tired magician. You blow gently. You whisper threats. You feed it a little kindling, just enough to keep it breathing. Sometimes your father leaves one of his boots beside the hearth, turned upside down to keep the leather pliable. You once made the mistake of touching it in the night. It was warm. You hugged it like a teddy bear. No regrets. Fire isn't just heat. It's social gravity. It's where everyone gathers, the one place in the house that feels remotely alive. You huddle near it during meals, lean close to sew or carve or patch worn-out things. You tell stories beside it. You fight beside it. You grieve beside it. But wood is scarce. Even more so by midwinter. You remember how much you had stacked in early autumn, thinking it would be enough. It never is. So the rationing begins. One log in the morning to warm the porridge, one at night to warm the bones. During the day, the fire is often left to smolder or go out entirely. You all wear your cloaks inside now and wrap your heads in linen even at the table. To stretch the wood pile, people get creative. Dried cow dung becomes fuel. So do bundles of straw twisted into tight, smoky rolls. You've even burned old thatch feathers bark and once shamefully someone's wooden spoon. Some families build a central hearth in the floor and hang an iron cauldron above it suspended by chains. Yours isn't that fancy. You have a shallow stone pit with a chimney hole that only draws smoke if you whisper kindly to it. The rest of the time you cough through the fog like a half-blind dog. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants had any real control over their interior temperatures. Some say thatch-roofed, daub-walled homes retained heat surprisingly well. Others say it's a miracle anyone survived at all. Having lived in one, now you lean toward the latter. When your fire does go out, and it will, you face the dreaded task of borrowing a flame from a neighbor. There's shame in it, though. Everyone does it. You bundle up, grab a glowing ember in a clay pot, and trudge across the frost-bitten lane to someone else's door. Sometimes they smile and hand it over. Other times they just grunt. And sometimes, if they're in a truly dark mood, they'll claim their fire went out too. Then it's a real crisis. You either hike to the next village or try to relight from scratch using flint and steel and luck. If you've ever tried to start a fire with cold fingers, damp tinder, and a wheezing cough, you know it's more prayer than science. There's a fringe belief in your village that fire can remember people. That if you speak too cruelly to it or disrespect it by tossing in wet logs or trash, it'll refuse to relight. Superstition. Of course, but you've seen old Margaret mutter apologies before stoking the flames. You do the same now, just in case. You also learn tricks like placing heated stones under your bedding, or warming a brick in the fire and setting it at your feet during meals. Once your sister roasted a few onions, not for eating, but to hold in her mittens like edible hand warmers. They didn't last long. She ate them after an hour. One of the strangest things people do, bake bricks into the oven and use them like medieval hot water bottles. You sleep with one wrapped in rags. It smells like ash and cheese. You love it more than anything. And there's this every time you rekindle a stubborn fire. Every time a flame dances back into life after sulking under ash for hours, it feels like a tiny miracle. Like you've won something. Like the house sighs with relief. Fire is the difference between surviving and surrendering. Not just physically, but mentally. It's the glow that reminds you, yes, it's winter. Yes, you're cold and coughing and hungry, but the world is not completely dead yet. There's still warmth in it. And tonight, thanks to you, your home has a heartbeat. You wake up before the sun. Again. Because in the depths of winter, every minute of light matters, and your body has learned this fact better than your mind ever could. There's no rooster crowing, no alarm bell, just your own breath fogging the air, and the distant thud of someone already splitting kindling. Outdoors. Yes, outdoors. Because despite the biting cold, medieval peasants like you still had chores to do in the open. Winter didn't mean rest, it meant urgency. You wrap yourself in every scrap of cloth you own and brace yourself for the moment when the door opens and the outside hits you like a bucket of ice. The fields are mostly barren now, save for the occasional patch of winter rye or kale trying its best to stay alive. But animals still need you. They're huddled in lean-tos, stables, or mud brick shelters, warm enough just barely if you pack them tight and insulate the gaps with straw. Or let's be honest, dung. You trudge through frozen mud and manure, hauling hay by hand. Your gloves are wet in 10 minutes. Your boots are stiff with frost. You break the ice crust off the water troughs with a stick, because if the cows don't drink, they won't give milk. If they don't give milk, well, you're back to watery broth and moldy bread. Speaking of which, your goat is missing again. Not missing like stolen more, like wandered off into a snowdrift to investigate something edible. You follow her tiny hoof prints around the back of the barn, muttering oaths you wouldn't say near a priest. When you finally find her, she's chewing what appears to be your mother's laundry line. Great. You're not angry. You're just cold. Bone-deep teeth rattling cold. Every task you do outside feels like a race against frostbite. You learn to keep moving not because you're lazy otherwise, but because if you stop, your fingertips start to tingle. And not in a good way. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants understood frostbite as a concept. There are records of blackened toes and meat flesh sloughing in old texts, but no clear consensus. You don't care about the scholarly debate. You just know that once your fingers go numb, your work slows down, and you can't afford that. There's an open scholarly debate about how much winter labor was expected of peasant children. Some argue kids had a lighter load in winter, helping indoors instead. Others claim they worked right alongside the adults, wrapping flax in freezing barns or minding sheep with frost sticking to their lashes. You lucky you get both. And still, there's always more to do. Fetch water from the stream, that's a daily challenge. The bucket is wooden, the rope is stiff, and the surface is often iced over. You've become quite good at breaking the ice in a tidy circle. You've also become excellent at not falling in. Once when you were smaller, you dropped the bucket into the stream and cried so hard your sister gave up her mittens for you. They were her only pair. You remember that every time your grip slips a little. Then there's the firewood run. You drag a crude sled into the woods stacked with ropes and your grandfather's hand axe. Trees are rare near the village. Most have already been claimed or cleared long ago, so you're harvesting fallen branches, storm debris, or saplings from the marsh edge. Everything's wet. Nothing splits cleanly. You carry home damp logs that hiss when thrown into the hearth and hope they'll dry by next week. Occasionally you see wildlife foxes, hares, even the shadow of a wild boar. They're thinner now too, hungrier. You keep your head down and your axe close. The sky in winter isn't really sky. It's more like a heavy gray lid pressing everything down. The snow doesn't sparkle. It crushes. The wind has fingers. And yet in all of this, there's a strange kind of beauty. The way your footprints steam when you walk. The glitter of ice on the cow's eyelashes. The silence that wraps the fields like a blanket. Your neighbors face it all, too. You pass them in the lanes, barely visible beneath cloaks and furs, and whatever patchwork of cloth they've cobbled together. You nod. Sometimes you trade. A few sticks of dry kindling for a lump of tallow. A basket of turnips for a chunk of smoked fish. Community becomes survival. There's even a fringe belief in your village that working outdoors during the cold strengthens the soul, that it hardens the bones and clarifies the mind. The old priest once said that a man who hauls ice in January is worth 3 who don't. You're not sure if that's theology or just a very specific metaphor, but hey, you'll take the compliment. One afternoon, while out gathering brush, you find something unexpected. A patch of wild onions poking through the snow like tiny green flags waving at you. You blink. You pick them carefully. You bring them home like treasure. Your mother doesn't cry, but she does kiss your forehead so long, you forget the cold for a moment. And that's the thing, no matter how cold it gets, how much your fingers ache, or your boots leak, or your lips crack, there are these little victories. A found onion. A bucket that doesn't freeze solid. A goat that returns home on her own. You live outside just enough to remember that you are still part of the land, still part of its rhythm even when everything seems to be sleeping under the snow. It's not always bleak, you know. There are moments even in the middle of this long, hard winter that surprise you with joy. Today, for example, the baker is giving away burnt bread. Not charity exactly. He calls it waste, the edges blackened and bitter, the insides dense as clay. But to you and your neighbors, it's a small miracle. You wait in line, breath steaming in the morning air, and when your turn comes, he hands you 2 lumps still faintly warm. You say thank you. You mean it. Back home, your mother grates turnip peelings into a pot, adds the bread, and lets it simmer into something that almost tastes like stew. You all eat slowly, soaking up every last drop with what's left of the crust. Your sister licks her bowl. No one scolds her. Sometimes a bit of joy sneaks in through tradition. Midwinter brings a few holy days, and that means breaks from labor, a bit of singing, maybe even a shared pot of ale. Not always and not much, but it happens. The feast of Saint Agnes, for example, is marked with sweet herbs and whispered hopes for spring. You don't get sweets exactly, but someone found dried apples and boiled them in honeyed wine. You got one sliver. It stuck to your teeth and made your whole face light up. There's a kind of music to these moments. The rhythmic chop of wood against block. The pop of a log on the fire. The soft hum of your mother as she stirs the pot. The creak of roof beams that somehow haven't collapsed yet. Life narrows in winter, becomes smaller, but in that smallness, things become louder, more intimate. You play games indoors when you can. Nothing elaborate, just throwing stones at a mark on the floor, or guessing which hand the acorn is in. Your little brother made a toy knight from scraps of wood, and the way he gallops it across the bench, narrating battles against imaginary dragons, makes you laugh even though your jaw still aches from the cold. You've learned to find delight in what others might miss. There's the miracle of the sun piercing the clouds for half an hour, of icicles glittering like crystal teeth on the eaves, of smoke curling up in perfect spirals into a sky so still you can hear your heartbeat if you listen. You've also gotten very good at noticing sounds, the difference between someone walking on frozen grass and someone walking on bare earth. The muffled thump of snow sliding off a roof, the sharp knock of a raven's beak against frozen bark. These are the things that tell you the world is still moving, even if slowly. And the animals, yes, even them can make you smile. The goat has learned to follow you like a dog. The chickens huddle together and make that low murmuring cluck when they're content. One of them lays an egg in the firewood pile, and when you find it round and perfect and warm, you feel like you've won a prize. Even work can be funny. You and your neighbor tried to haul a sled full of wet timber through the lane and ended up slipping flat on your backs, laughing like fools, arms full of firewood and snow. It hurt, sure, but it was funny. And in winter, laughter might be the rarest warmth of all. Sometimes the priest visits and tells stories, not from the Bible, not always. Stories of saints who talked to wolves or shepherds who found gold in snowbanks. Whether you believe them doesn't really matter. They feel like warmth, like hope, and that's enough. And when the nights are longest and you can't sleep, your mother tells you tales from her own childhood. About a year, the river froze so hard, they walked across it to market. Or a time she saw a fox leap into the air and disappear into a snowdrift, so deep it took an hour to dig him out. You fall asleep to her voice, eyes closed, dreaming of foxes and frozen rivers. Joy in winter is not loud. It's not bright. It's quiet like a candle flame that doesn't flicker. You don't shout it. You hold it close like a secret, like a coal wrapped in cloth. It's not always enough, but sometimes it is. And on those nights, you think maybe you will make it. Maybe spring will come after all. Maybe the snow will melt. The ground will soften, and the world will smell like dirt and rain again. Maybe this whole bitter season is just a hard chapter in a much longer story. And maybe, just maybe, you're stronger than you think. The cold doesn't kill you directly, it just makes everything harder. Even the smallest task becomes a slow, numbing trial. Take water, for instance. Every morning you walk to the well half-frozen bucket in hand. The rope is stiff with frost, the pulley groans, and sometimes the water has a skin of ice so thick you have to crack it with a stone. Your hands go red, then white, then blue, but you keep working, because no water means no food, no drink, no washing, nothing. You wonder sometimes how people lived like this for generations. But then you look at your own hands, cracked, calloused, strong. You realize you're doing it too. There's no real privacy in winter. The family stays huddled in a single room pressed close to the hearth. Every movement is noticed. Every sigh or cough, every creak of the floorboards. It drives you a little mad sometimes. You crave silence, solitude. But then the wind howls, and you're suddenly grateful for the bodies around you warm and alive. You wrap your cloak tighter. The wind slips in anyway, coiling around your ankles like a cold cat. You shift your feet on the packed earth floor, trying to remember what it felt like to stand barefoot in grass. And still you work. You mend clothes, sew patches, twist rope, carve pegs for next year's planting. Anything to stay useful, to stay warm. That's the trick, never stop moving. Stillness invites the chill to creep in and take root. Some nights your father wakes coughing. The smoke from the fire lingers thick in the rafters, and you've grown used to the smell of it clinging to every surface. But sometimes the air feels heavier, harder to breathe, and you worry. Everyone does. Indoor fires are both warmth and risk. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof, and if the wind blows the wrong way, the smoke stays with you. Historians still argue whether this setup, these smoke-filled halls, caused more illness or prevented it by killing off bacteria. But you don't have time for debates. You just open the shutters a crack, say a prayer, and keep stoking the fire. There's a new worry now. The food stores are getting low. You all know it. The onions have gone soft. The barley tastes faintly of mold, and the last of the smoked pork is more bone than meat. You scrape the bottom of the flour sack and wonder how many more weeks it must stretch. But somehow there's always something. A neighbor trades a wedge of cheese for wool. Your uncle traps a rabbit. The baker's son brings news of a traveling merchant who might pass through with dried bean salt, maybe even oranges. You haven't seen an orange since you were little. You can hardly remember the taste. The snow has thickened. Travel is nearly impossible now. The village is sealed off, wrapped tight in its white cocoon. If someone gets sick, really sick, there's little you can do. You rub nettle salve into your brother's chest and hope it helps. You boil water for steam. You sing to him in the dark. Your family believes in signs. A crow perching on the windowsill means bad luck. A red sunrise means a storm is coming. You don't always believe it, but when you see that crow feathers puffed against the cold, you still mutter a charm under your breath, just in case. Fringe records from monastic scribes talk about villagers using charms made of ash and iron to trap winter spirits in jars or nail them to trees. You've never seen this done, but your grandmother swears by it. There's a rusted horseshoe over your door for that very reason. Some days blur together gray, heavy quiet, but others carry strange beauty. You step outside and see hoarfrost glittering on the hedges like spun sugar. Or you walk to the edge of the wood and hear nothing but the soft crump of your own footsteps and the distant creak of snow-laden trees. You feel very small and very alive. It's odd how winter sharpens your senses. Your nose tells you which neighbor is burning peat. Your ears detect a distant bell from the abbey, muffled but steady. Your fingers learn to feel flaws in thread or cracks in stone without needing to see them. And you wait. More than anything, you wait. For sun. For thaw. For the first green blade to push through the crust of ice and mud. For the first bird song. The waiting is the hardest part, but also the most human. Because underneath all the hunger and shivering underneath the soot and cracked hands, there's a quiet strength. A shared understanding that this is the test. And if you can pass it, if you can outlast the silence and the cold, then everything that comes after will feel like a miracle. You don't say this aloud. You don't need to. Everyone knows. There's a strange rhythm to winter. You grow used to its quiet thud, its slow heartbeat. You wake before dawn, not because you want to, but because the fire needs tending, and your breath rises in cold puffs even under the covers. The first task is always the same: get the fire going. Without it, the day doesn't begin. It simply stays frozen in that twilight state of waiting. You don't have matches, of course. Just flint and steel, some dried moss or straw, and the hope that the last embers didn't die completely in the night. Sometimes it takes 10-15 minutes. You curse softly, rhythmically, through chattering teeth, trying not to wake the baby. When the flame finally flickers up, it feels like a small, private victory. You make a weak broth for breakfast. Barley water if you're lucky, just warm water if you're not. There's no rush to eat. The day will be long and there's not much to fill it, but there's always something. The thatch leaks in one spot, it needs patching even in the snow. The goats need their hooves checked. You sharpen tools, repair traps, patch boots. Winter is both punishment and opportunity. Things you neglect now might fail in spring, and then you'll really be in trouble. Outside, snow weighs heavy on the roof beams. You hear the occasional groan of wood under pressure, and it reminds you that even the house needs strength to survive. You bundle up, every layer counts. Wool tunic, sheepskin cloak, a second pair of hose beneath the first. Your mittens are rough spun, and they don't really keep out the wind, but they're better than nothing. You tuck hot stones from the hearth into your pockets. It's a trick everyone uses. A trip to the forest is necessary today. Firewood is low, so you strap on wooden snowshoes if you have them, or you trudge slowly, sinking up to your knees. The woods are hushed, eerie. No birds, no voices. Just the distant crack of branches and the hiss of snow slipping from limbs. You collect fallen branches, always looking for the dry ones, testing by feel and sound. You don't cut down living trees unless you must. Dead wood burns better anyway. You stack it neatly on a sled and pull it home, breath coming in clouds, legs shaking. Your nose is numb, but you don't notice until it begins to sting. Your fingers, even through gloves, burn a little with cold. You remember the warning signs of frostbite tingling that turns to nothing. You flex your hands just in case. Historians still argue whether medieval peasants truly understood frostbite, or if they simply called it winter rot and left it at that. But you know better. You've seen a man lose fingers before spring. The animals suffer too. Cows huddle together in the byre steam rising from their flanks. You lay extra straw and shovel dung with stiff arms. One of the pigs has a limp, probably from ice. You rub ointment on its leg and whisper something soft, not out of kindness exactly, but habit. The cat is smarter than all of you. She never strays far from the fire. She curls on the bench tail, wrapped neatly, eyes slitted. You envy her. Food stores are inventoried again. You count beans, measure salt. The root cellar has a strange smell today, earth and rot and hope. You discard 2 squishy turnips and cut the bad parts off 3 more. Every scrap matters, and still you find joy where you can. Someone sings while darning socks. You hear children laughing over a game of knucklebones. Your sister draws patterns in the soot on the wall with the tip of a stick, little swirls and stars. You add a crude sun and grin. The monastery bell rings in the distance. You can't see the abbey, not through the snow and trees, but its chime marks the afternoon. Time flows differently in winter. It stretches like taffy, long and slow, then suddenly snaps forward when you're not looking. Evening brings the familiar rituals. Candles are lit, a prayer murmured. You eat a meal of pottage grain onion, maybe a bit of dried meat if it's a good night. The taste doesn't matter as much as the heat it brings. You wrap up tight again, check the door latch twice, and press rags into the windowsill, cracks. The wind has picked up, and snow hisses against the shutters like sand. Tonight feels colder. The fire pops, shooting little sparks. You huddle close, hands spread. The room smells of smoke and stew and unwashed wool. It's oddly comforting. Your little brother is curled on a straw mat, already half asleep. You hand him a carved toy, just a lump of wood shaped like a bird. He holds it to his chest. You stroke his hair, thinking how small he still seems. And then the moment of silence. Just a few seconds when no one talks, no one moves. You feel the house breathe its creaks and sighs. You let your own breath slow to match. Fringe accounts from 14th century journals mention something called the listening hour, when families would sit quietly before bed to hear the snow speak. Maybe it was just a poetic way of describing exhaustion. But sitting there in that stillness, you almost understand. You close your eyes, and for a heartbeat, you feel the whole world wrapped in white. By now, winter feels endless. You've stopped trying to count the days. The calendar might say it's only mid-February, but the light hasn't changed. The cold hasn't loosened. Every morning is just another page of the same gray book. Still, there are signs, faint ones, like whispers from the future. One morning you wake before anyone else and step outside to relieve yourself. The sky is lighter than it should be. The air smells slightly different, less like wood smoke, more like damp earth. A crow calls from a tree that wasn't visible before, now freed of its snow burden. You notice and then you forget. Life continues. Always something to fix, clean drag, carry repair. The thatch leaked again last night, soaking one corner of the sleeping mat. You move it, hang the woolen blanket near the fire to dry. The smell of wet straw lingers in your nose. Your father's cough is worse. He hides it during the day, but at night it rattles the rafters. You've tried everything, garlic steeped in wine honey from last summer's bees' nettle broth. He still smiles. He still jokes. But you've seen that hollow look before. You fetch more wood. There's something comforting about the repetition. Your body knows what to do even when your mind is weary. Your hands braid new rope from old hemp. Your fingers ache, but the rhythm helps. Twist, loop, pull. Again. Later, you and your sister break the ice in the basin and wash your faces, gasping at the shock of cold. She laughs and splashes you. For a moment, it feels like summer again, but the wind still groans. A traveler comes through the village today. His boots are cracked and he carries a sack over one shoulder. Everyone stares as he walks past half mad from hunger or the long road. He says nothing, only nods once and keeps going. You watch until he disappears around the bend. Some say he came from the coast. Others say he escaped a plague town. Rumors always grow in the dark months. You help mend the barn door. A storm broke one of the hinges and the boards rattle in the wind. You and your uncle hold the pieces together while someone hammers. The sound echoes across the valley, oddly cheerful. When the sun sets, the sky turns violet. Not gray, not black. Violet with a sliver of rose gold along the ridge. You stare at it, wondering if it means something. The adults don't notice. But you do. Dinner is thinner than before, barley water. A few greens grown in the cold frame. You chew slowly, savoring even the blandness. Your grandmother sings while stirring the pot. It's a song about saints and miracles in spring. That night the wind changes direction. You don't realize it at first. But in the morning you wake to find water dripping from the eaves. The snow on the roof is sliding. Not much, but enough to notice. You run outside still barefoot, ignoring the bite of cold. You look up. The icicles are crying. The thaw has begun. It doesn't mean warmth. Not yet. March is cruel, muddy teasing. The snow melts, then refreezes, then falls again. But now you have proof. Change is coming. The path to the river reappears in patches. Brown earth peeks through the snow like a wounded animal. You walk it slowly, feeling every dip and rise beneath your boots. Birds, actual birds, flutter from branch to branch. Their songs sound rusty, like instruments that haven't been played in months. Inside, the mood changes. People sit up straighter. The fire burns lower. Doors are left open longer. Even the animals seem restless. You help clean the tools for planting: rakes, spades, sickles. Your brother oils the iron. Your sister braids fresh cords for the harnesses. These are spring tasks. Spring! One evening, your father smiles at you over the fire and says, "You've grown tougher this year." You want to say something clever back, but instead you just nod, because he's right. You've learned to carry weight, to suffer silently, to share joy in small things, to ration not just food, but laughter, to wait. And that's what winter is in the end, not just cold or hardship or hunger. It's a teacher, a cruel one, yes, but also wise. It teaches patience, it teaches humility, it teaches that even the longest night ends. And now, with mud on your boots and smoke in your hair and calluses on your palms, you feel something stir in your chest that you haven't felt in months. Not warmth exactly, but hope. The thaw doesn't arrive like a festival. There's no trumpet blast or rainbow overhead. It slips in quietly, the way a secret spreads across a small village. One puddle, one bird call, one gust of wind that smells faintly, shockingly of grass. You wake one morning, and the snow is gone. Not all of it, not yet. But the drifts beside the barn have melted into slush, and the muddy footprints near the well no longer freeze overnight. The land is soggy and brown and ugly, but it's alive. And that's all that matters. You feel it in your bones in the way you stretch and move. There's still hunger in the house, still thin soup and stale bread, but you move through the day with a new kind of energy. the kind that says we made it. Work begins early now. The ground must be prepared for spring planting. You help dig out the rocks and roots, your fingers numb from cold earth, but your back steady. The oxen are restless too. You lead one by a fraying rope, its breath steaming in the morning light. The days stretch a little longer. Not much, but enough to notice. Chores change. Less firewood, more water carrying. Less sewing, more sewing. You kneel in the dirt beside your mother, pressing seeds into the mud. Beans, maybe. Or peas. They all look the same right now, like little tokens of faith. Your boots are soaked through by midday. The mud pulls at them greedy and thick. But you laugh anyway. Because the snow is gone. Because the sun is out. Because there's no more smoke inside the house and your lungs feel lighter. One afternoon, you take a walk by yourself. Just a small loop past the field up the hill, where the old tree leans sideways. From the top, you see your village as it truly is, patched and bent and brown, but still standing. There's a cart in the road now, one of the first travelers you've seen in weeks. A woman selling eggs and news. She says a bridge has collapsed upriver and a monastery is sending out alms early this year. You wave politely and hurry back home to tell your family. Everyone is smiling more now. Even the cranky old man who lives alone at the edge of the woods. He's sunning himself on a stool outside his door, a wool blanket over his knees, and a grin that shows all three of his teeth. Your sister finds a crocus poking up through the thatch near the latrine. She squeals and drags you to see it. It's barely the size of your thumbnail, purple and trembling, but you stare at it for a full minute, like it's a holy relic. That night, your family eats the last of the pickled apples. You all pretend they're sweet. Someone tells a story about a hedgehog that got drunk on mead. Even your father chuckles. The air inside the house is thinner now, cool, but no longer dangerous. You sleep deeply for once without waking. And when you dream, it's not of snow or wolves or bare trees. You dream of wheat, of linen drying in the sun, of the river running free again, of laughter and warmth and food you don't have to ration. You dream of spring, because this winter didn't break you. It bent you, reshaped you, made you stronger in the quietest, cruelest way. And now that it's over, now that the worst has passed, you carry that strength into the new season like a secret under your skin. You survived. Word count 1078. Wind down 300 words. And now, as the last snow melts in your memory, and the fields open up before you, let your breath ease. Let your shoulders drop. Let your jaw unclench. You've wandered through a world of fire-lit shadows, frozen fields, and soot-dark skies, and you came out the other side. Not without scars, but with stories, with strength, with softness earned the hard way. The quiet rhythm of that life still echoes in you, wood cracking in the hearth, the low rumble of oxen in the cold, the hush of falling snow outside a thatched roof. You remember how the light returned slowly, gently, like the first crocus poking through a world that had almost given up. And you carry that memory now into your own quiet evening. Maybe the air around you is still and warm. Maybe it's humming with the soft buzz of an electric fan, or wrapped in the hush of night. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, this part of the story is yours. You are stronger than you think. You have waded through storms before, and spring always comes, so let your breath settle like fresh straw. Let your body rest as if curled beside the last embers of the fire. Let your thoughts drift gently like chimney smoke curling into the night. Tomorrow holds new work, new light, new warmth. But tonight, there is only calm. You are safe. You are still. You are home. End of script. Sweet dreams.